Hello there.
Hello and welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us at our live field trip. We are currently live from Mercy Mill Farm in Augusta County. And in just a minute, I'm going to turn it over to our host, Miss Allison Jones. And she is with our farmer, Morgan Slavin Messer, and they are going to show you around her farm. We are going to give you the opportunity to ask questions as well. You can either type them into the chat box for us. We'll also offer an opportunity where you can interact directly and ask Ms. Morgan questions. If you would, go ahead, if you are not muted, and go ahead and mute yourself now, and we will get started on our field trip. So thank you guys for joining us, and I am going to turn it over live to Mercy Mill Farm.
Hello, everybody. I want to introduce you to Miss Morgan. She's the farmer here at Mercy Mill Farm, and she's going to show us around and teach us more about beef cattle today.
Awesome. Well, welcome to Mercy Mill Farm. I am very excited to, I guess, be in your classroom today. I've done a lot of classroom visits, but I've never actually had the classroom to my place before. So this is super cool. I thought I'd do just a quick rundown on maybe what you'll be seeing today before we get kicked off. This is your beef unit, right? And so I've got some bred heifers out here. We'll talk about terminology later, but we've got some female calves out here that I want to introduce you guys to. But before we go, I'm going to take a bucket of grain out with me. And so I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about beef nutrition, what cows eat, and see if that spurs any questions from you guys. So let's go in the barn. All right, so cows are, how's the lighting here? Like, good. Okay, all right. I just want to make sure you can see me okay. So cows are ruminants. And I know there were a few questions out there. Some of the staff sent me some questions earlier today about, what do cows eat and what does grass-fed mean and that sort of thing. And so I thought real quickly I'd cover kind of the general timeline of the age of a cow in this situation, or a beef animal. And so, calves, when they're born, they are out in the pasture. You'll see what that looks like here in just a little bit. But as they are taken care of by their mom, they stay with their mom until they're somewhere between 4 to 6 months old. Primarily, it's outdoors, out in the open. Sometimes if there's inclement weather, they might come into a barn or have an area that they can get in and out of the weather. But they're pretty much living out on grass for that first 4 to 6 months of age. About that point in time, the farmer will do something called weaning, which means they separate the calf from the mother. And so maybe if you guys have raised puppies before, or kittens or something, or even us as humans, when we go away to college, that could be considered weaning from our parents. That separation there where the younger animal learns how to live off of its mother's milk and starts kind of finding its own nutrition. And so once it gets to that age, there's a period of time called backgrounding, which you could essentially equate this to the calves' like teenage years. So they need a lot of protein during that time to grow their muscles big, make sure that they grow up healthy and strong, just like, drink your milk, make sure your parents are always on you, telling you to eat your fruits and vegetables. It's a really critical time to make sure they have the proper nutrition to grow healthy. And so at that point in time, that period normally lasts maybe 5 or 6 months. And at that point, they're ready to go into what's called the finishing stage. And so that stage is where a beef animal is ready to get more of a high energy feed. And so that's where they start actually putting on the pounds that essentially make them a good beef product. And so beef is essentially the product that you get from an animal once it's been processed, it's been slaughtered, and then it's your hamburger, it's your steaks. And the nutrition that you give those animals or what you feed those animals in that finishing stage is actually impactful for how long you feed them for, sometimes the quality of the beef product that you end up getting. And I might be talking a lot of details here, so I'll kind of put a pin in it. And if you have any questions more about that, we can talk about it. But what I want to do is show you what we're actually going to be feeding to these heifers today. So these heifers are primarily on grass. The grass that's out there, there's some clover in it. There's some other good nutritious fiber that's out there that they're going to be eating as their primary food. But what you see here is a little bit of sweet grain. So you see some corn in there. You've got some pellets that have some protein in it. But what's in this grain that the cows really like is actually a little bit of molasses. It makes it sweet. As you can probably tell, it's kind of like putting syrup on your pancakes. And even though this is just a little bit of grain here today, what we're going to be doing is going out here and trying to make friends with these heifers. These ladies have just come out of the backgrounding stage. These particular animals that you're going to see are not going to be animals that end up in your freezer or your local grocery store. They're actually ones that are going to go back and be what we call replacement cows. So they're going to end up going on and living a pretty long life on our family farm so that they can produce those calves that I talked about earlier that end up being your yummy hamburger. So with that being said, that's kind of what the grain is. I do want to show you what packaging it came in because I don't know if you all have ever taken the time to look on the back of your Oreo container, but if you've ever looked at the nutritional value on the back of your snacks or anything that you buy food product wise, they normally have a nutritional chart on there. And same thing happens with livestock animals. So everything is unique. This particular one is just like I said before, an all stock. It's got all the different protein and fiber, all the minerals that you see in there. And if we have some time, I can actually show you what a mineral block looks like. But just like humans, livestock and cattle, they have to actually have their own minerals and vitamins, that sort of thing, almost like a I don't know, like one of those little chewy Flintstone vitamins that you might get. So it looks a little bit different, but there's a lot of things that are similar between cows and human nutrition. All right. So with that being said, maybe let's get loaded up in the pickup truck and we'll go out and actually see some cows. And I guess now's a good time. If you guys have any questions, put in the chat box. You can go ahead and do that. Hopefully I don't make you car sick on the ride, but right. The truck started. That's always a good way to start this process. All right. So if anybody, I'll just kind of chit chat. So I'll let somebody holler if they have a question. But one of the questions that I saw from earlier today was about women farmers, because if you think about what a farmer looks like, you might not think of me. You might be thinking of an older man in some overalls and some straw sticking out of his teeth or something like that. And even though we do have those types of farmers too, farmers come in all different shapes and sizes and backgrounds and diversity. So I grew up on a family beef cattle farm, but there's a lot of farmers that don't. They're first generation. They just like being outdoors and like growing things and being around livestock. And there's all different types and kinds of farmers. So with that being said, I actually have a job off the farm. I do not farm full time, but I've lived here at this place for a little over, well, I guess going on 2 years now. And I really like it, and it's kind of a lot of work, but it's something that I really enjoy, and something that my family has done. Actually, my nieces are the 7th generation on my family's farm. So it's kind of cool to have the perspective of a long, couple 100 years worth of family farming behind me. Oops, sorry, don't have my seatbelt on. But it's also nice to have an opportunity like this to be here where I kind of get to try out my own thing. I've dabbled in some sheep. That's pretty fun. You're not going to see any of those today, but I do, enjoy those too. So looks like Allison's getting some good wood pile there. All right, there's the ladies. Ignore the weeds. You don't see the weeds.
It looks like you've been out here already today.
Yeah, I did. I had to make sure they were going to be camera ready. I came out here just to track them down right before we got logged on here. So I will tell you that these ladies are still getting used to people. So that's why I have the special treats for them. So what I'm hoping, hopefully this is close enough, and I'll give me a little bit of space to put some feet out and then get back in and see if they come over to us. They are used to trucks because they got fed little babies out in the field with their mom. So they know that a truck normally means food, but we'll kind of see. So stay tuned if they come up to us or they run away. Not sure.
Do you want us to stay?
Yeah, why don't you stay in and I'll put it out and I'll kind of just stand in front of the truck door there and see if they come up behind me.
What kinds of cows are these?
These are they're kind of a cross of some things. So typically if you have a crossbred animal, you can call it commercial in the beef industry. But these are mostly, oh, ladies, don't run. These are mostly Angus with some Simmental crosses. Yeah, see, these white-faced girls know what the grain is all about. Come here, girl. Come here, girl. Here, girls. Come here, girls. You know what this is. Don't be shy. Yep, that's right. I see you, 519. You're always hungry. Come on. Come here, girls. Yeah, that's good. Come on over here. There's still, this is only the 4th day that I've tried to tease them. That's what we call this, is when we're trying to get them used to people, we call it teasing them. So we give them a little bit of grain and it takes a lot of time. So you kind of pour the grain out and you just kind of wait for them to come on up. So I'm going to walk around on the other side of the truck while Allison's taking some video there and see if that gives them enough space to come up. Yeah, they know what's up.
Morgan, you referred to one of them by number. Can you explain the tags in their ears and how you keep track of them?
Sure, absolutely. So every single person who tags their animals does it differently. Animal identification is completely unique to every single farmer, but I can kind of explain, and maybe that one, maybe 017 right there in front of Allison might be close enough. She can zoom up there. I'm not sure. But so those blue tags are ear tags is what we call them. It's you insert them very similar to how you get your ears pierced. There's kind of like a gun and a little sharp pin and it pokes it through the ear into a stud on the back, and they stay there pretty much your whole life. But so these blue tags have the way my dad does this, because these heifers actually are owned by my dad and he's paying me to take care of them this summer. The way that they do it is that number in their ear is actually the exact same number of their mother. So we can kind of tell over time, over different generations of cows, who is, who belongs to who, or like a family line of, that mother had a really great heifer that we kept back. And I guess I'll pause and say heifer is a term that we use for female cows that have never had a calf before. So these are females, they've never had calves before, and they should be having their first calf somewhere between September and November this fall. But anyway, that number in there helps us identify what the animal is. They're all unique. No two have the same in each age batch. They also have the date they were born. And then they also have my dad's last name, just in case they get loose. Somebody knows who to call if they're out on the road somewhere and they need to go home. So. Yeah, they're doing pretty good. They're kind of stepping away a little bit because I kind of came around the front of the truck, but they're finding that grain pretty good. Oh yeah, okay. So we're getting a question about like gestation. Gestation is the length that a cow will carry her calf, like a pregnancy length. And cows are just like humans. The mamas will carry them for 9 months. And so, yeah, we can kind of, Allison's getting a second look over here. So pretty much these ladies are going to stay here until probably late July, early August. And then my dad will get them gathered up and he'll trailer them to their new home. And I told you earlier that we call them replacements, replacement heifers. And that's because we're using them to kind of backfill in our cow herd. My dad, his cow herd actually has about 500 mama cows, which is a lot. And but every year there's some cows that, you know, get too old or they kind of need to move on to a new place. They need to be sold. And so these cows, these heifers will end up replacing those cows. The number of cows here is we've got 39 in this group. So 39, and the farm itself is 68 acres. Typically, you can keep, depending on weather and enough moisture, that sort of thing, you can typically keep 1 cow per acre here in Virginia. But if they're eating a lot, like if they're taking care of a baby or if it's cow-calf pair, then you might want to have 2 acres per pair. So they got plenty of grass here for the summer. Any other questions?
Morgan, you mentioned back in the barn that cows are ruminants. Can you explain what that means and how that relates to them eating out there?
That is a great question. What is a ruminant? So you all probably don't eat grass on the daily, right? Why? Because our stomachs don't process it the same way as a cow's does. Now, here's a fun myth that I'll bust for you. If you've heard this before, some people say that cows have 4 stomachs, and that's not necessarily true. They've got 1 stomach, but it's got 4 compartments. And the first compartment in that stomach process is the rumen. And so when cows are out here and they're eating grass, that grass goes into their digestion. Bacteria breaking down that fiber. Now, sometimes it's a long process. Sometimes they have to kind of bring that back up. You ever seen a cow chewing its cud, just sitting there, just chewing away, even though it's not really eating anything? It's because sometimes particles will end up having to come back up, get manually broken down again by the teeth, and then go back down to be digested. So if my anatomy class serves me right, the first compartment is rumen, then reticulum, then omasum, and then abomasum. And I hope one of my professors out there heard that, because I'm pretty sure that's right. And so anyway, that's kind of the breakdown. But yeah, one of the questions that was asked also that I saw was, what is grass fed and what does that mean? So I was talking to you earlier about the different finishing stages. And you know, the vast majority of a cow's life is spent on grass. Doesn't matter what kind of cow it is. If it's going to the feedlot and eventually going to get finished and be hamburger, the majority of its life is still on grass. It's just that last portion, that last, 6 months or so, that you're trying to put on that finishing, that fat on them. That's the time in which that terminology of grass fed or grain finish kind of comes into play. Sometimes you can finish animals on grass, but it just takes longer. Grain fed can kind of make it go along a little bit faster. All right, I think I'm getting instructions to move along here. So maybe we will ride down here and check out the water.
Go back towards better reception because you're.
Oh, am I phasing out? Let me get. All right, let's go back up on top. Let's go on top of the hill then, maybe, because there's a water up there too.
So Morgan, the grass that's out here, is this just like the grass that's in your yard?
So this is a little bit different, and you can see there's different levels. And I'm not great with my forages, so I cannot tell you exactly what kind of grass it is. Probably should have looked into that a little bit before now, but you can see I talked about clover. Clover can be a good source of fiber, and that's clover that you have probably seen or tried to look for 4-leaf clovers before. And so I think, oh, good. And so it's not the exact same type of grass that you'll find in your yard. And actually farmers will plant specific types of grass because like I talked about earlier, everything that a cow puts in her body, the farmer is being mindful of and making sure it's meeting her nutritional values. So different types of grasses carry different types of nutritional value. So sometimes they'll specifically plant different types of grass to make sure she's getting a diversified diet.
Morgan, we got a question from one of our elementaries of why don't these have any horns?
Oh, that's a great question. So a question from one of our elementary students is, why don't these cows have horns? Oh, look, here comes 519. She's like, you got some more grain? So why don't these animals have any horns? So there are specific breeds of beef cattle that have horns, and then there are breeds that do not. And so those that do not have any horns are called polled animals, P-O-L-L, poll. And so essentially that just means that they naturally just don't have horns. Sometimes there's certain breeds that purebred, they have horns, like Herefords. If you've ever seen red and white cows, Herefords, well, sometimes there'll be a horned version of that animal, but honestly, a lot of farmers don't like to have horns on their cows for safety reasons, both for the safety of the animal interacting with other animals. Sometimes they can get to be territorial. They can try and, create space for themselves. And with that being said, they can maybe booger each other up or bruise themselves up. And then honestly, when the farmer is handling them, it can also become dangerous if they've got some pointy horns on their head. So,
are there any questions?
Any other questions right now?
Morgan, we've got a question for you. All right,
okay.
This is from one of your first grade classrooms watching you. Why aren't there any male cows out there?
Oh, that's a great question. So farmers typically like to have their calves during a certain window of time. We call this a breeding season or a calving season. And it's because when we have calves, we like to make sure that they're all born at once for a couple different reasons. All the calves, if they're born, and typically your calving window is within 45, 60 days, or you try to have it narrowed up like that. Sometimes it gets a little bit longer. But you try to have that narrow window so that when you go to sell the calves, they're all the same size. If you have a calf that's, 6 months older than the other, their sizes vary a lot. And so you want to just make sure that you're, when you're selling those calves, that you kind of have a uniform product, that they're all pretty similar. The other reason is honestly a farmer's time. Like, time management is really important. They typically have a lot of other things going on the farm, whether they've got crops or they've got hay or something like that. And so making sure that window of time is cut down is pretty important to make sure that they know when to expect those calves. Now, to answer the question of why there's not a bull in here is because these ladies are already bred. I said before that they should be calving somewhere between September and November. So there's no need to have a bull in here with them at this time. So at home, the bulls all stay in one big lot, and they just hang out there until it's their time to breed, and then they go about their business.
How long is it pregnant? And then why do the bulls hang out together?
Why do the bulls hang out together, and how long do they stay pregnant? So these ladies they'll be pregnant for 9 months. So just like just like a human. Why the bulls all stay together? Typically, again, that's kind of like a management. You want to make sure that they're not. Oh, yes, they like to live in a herd. So these animals, you'll know, like, watch how these animals are moving out here. So you keep them, any animal does better when it's around other animals for a couple different reasons. If they're eating, like, there's a little bit of natural competition when they're eating, so they're more inclined to eat more and kind of stay with the group. But then also, they have a natural herding tendency. They move together, and you can kind of see that as Allison has been taking a videotape here. They kind of move together. Nobody's spread. There's 68 acres here, and they're all kind of within 1 acre of each other.
About 2 other questions. How long do they live, and how old are they when you sell them?
Okay, 2 more questions here about kind of like length of time and timeline. So how old does a cow live? Honestly, I think I want to say that some of the oldest cows I've seen have been somewhere between 12 and 13 years old on my dad's farm. I think it all kind of varies, but if a cow that's out here and her job is to have a calf every year, then they're typically 12 to 13 years old in those productive years. And then how old are they when they go to market? That ranges a little bit. It can be anywhere from 18 months to 30 months. And I say there's a range there because I was telling you earlier that there's different types of finishing. You can be grass fed or you can be grain finished. And typically, if you grass finish an animal, it takes a good bit longer than if you grain finish, which kind of like speeds up the process. There's a little bit more energy in that type of feed, and so it kind of gets that end product quicker. I will also mention that I don't know if anybody has ever heard of the disease called mad cow or BSE, but typically you want to try and have animals processed under 30 months of age anyway, as a safety measure to protect against those things. If anybody does any hunting and you've heard of wasting disease in deer, it's a pretty similar, just ran over a branch, kind of like a neurological disease, and but it doesn't affect young animals.
Morgan, here's a fun one for you. How fast can cows run? That's what your second
Oh
graders
gosh.
would like to know. Your second graders would like to know how fast cows can run.
They run faster than me, I'll tell you that. How about that? That's why I stay in the truck. I can't answer that one. I have no idea. They run fast. They can run fast. Maybe like 10 miles an hour, something like that. Yeah, we'll take a stab getting some commentary that clearly somebody has tried to outrun one before, but yeah. So, oh man. Other thoughts?
Where do they go after they are sold?
After they are sold, so from the farm. Okay, so these particular, so if these ladies had actually been boys and had been steers, they would have, in our particular instance, they would have stayed on our farm and gone through what I mentioned before was a backgrounding program. So they would go into a large barn where they would be, and I'm kind of like looking up here. I might want to go up here and close the gate so we can loop. I'll kind of make a loop around just because I didn't realize they were going to go this direction. But anyway, so when they leave the farm, typically they'll go into a backgrounding operation. Backgrounding just means, like I said before, they're in their kind of teenage years and they need some pretty specific types of feed. So sometimes it's in more of a confined area, like in a barn, or sometimes it's out on grass. But either way, it's they go into that phase. And then after that, when they go to a finishing operation, typically at that point, my family, we don't finish anything. So that's when they actually go away from the farm officially. So about that point, they're probably a year old at that point. And
They go to a market?
They go to, well, sometimes they go to a market. Like I said, it's literally everybody does things differently. But what ends up happening is you can either go through a market where somebody you know, just like if you went to, if you went to the mall and you were going shopping, it's like the cattle version of the mall. People show up to buy things there. Now, my family in particular, we do direct sales with finishing operations, so that they just go straight from our farm to the next farm. They don't go through a market. They don't get shopped around or anything like that. All right, let's pause and I'll close the gate really quickly just in case they wander down here some more and you can think of some more questions. All right. Tammy, did you have another question come in?
So when they go to the finishing lot, from there, is that where they go to be processed so they become food for us?
Yes. So at the finishing lot, they're going to stay there. This one doesn't work. It does. Oh, okay. There's not a lot of water in this water fountain, but we'll cruise over here and see if it kind of broke the other day. So, well, we can talk about it a little bit. So, once they get to the finishing lot, it's about 6 months to a year that they might be there, and then they end up going. That's when they ultimately get sold to a processor, and they'll go on to a facility where they're slaughtered, and then they end up going into your retail location or your grocery store, that sort of thing. So, yes, we can talk about the water here. This one is not looking exactly like it's supposed to, but we'll talk about it. So this is an automatic waterer, which replaces, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but you don't see any ponds or streams or anything on this particular farm. That's because we don't have any natural bodies of water. So this is, if you ever wake up in the middle of the night and you go to the fridge and you put your cup in and the water comes out, that's essentially what this is for cows. So this, there's a well here on the property, and so it's been drilled into, and if you've been driving around, you might have seen one down in the field over here, or up on top of the hill. I've got, gosh, this place has probably got 7 automatic waterers, but water fills this thing, and then actually, Allison, if you want to zoom in, you can kind of see how this works here. It's been drained down a little bit. I had to cut it off the other day, but there's water in there, and these balls will float up to the top, so it kind of seals it in, keeps the water fresh. And so in the winter time, it helps prevent the water from freezing, so the cows can still have access, and I don't have to come out here and hack open a pond or anything. But then it also is a good way to make sure that there's always fresh access to water for the cows.
So the cows just take their nose and push down.
Yes, that's exactly right. So you can kind of see here that the balls are like buoyant. So when the water's been drank down now, but typically this thing automatically refills. So this ball will typically be up here like this. The cows come over, they're like, hey, I want to drink water. They push it down, water comes up and they drink out of it.
Yep. Morgan, can you talk about how much water they drink and how much they eat? We've had a couple questions on how big they get, like how much they'll weigh. So if you could talk about how big the cows get, and so how much food and water they need to get that size.
I might need a little bit of help from my ag in the classroom, for instance, but it's one bathtub full,
yeah.
bathtub full of water a day. And then 30 to 50 gallons. 30. I'm like interpreting like the hand signals over here by the camera. So I'm not camera ready today, but yeah, so that's a lot of water if you think about it. Now the ladies, and I might need some help on how much they get up to about 1,600 pounds if they're a finished animal. These ladies probably won't get that big. They'll probably land in the 12 to 1,300 range, but as far as food that they eat a day, 35 to 50 pounds of food a day. So Tammy's really saving me with the statistics over here, and most of that's grass. Yeah. Actually, I would say vast majority of that is grass, unless they are, like I said before, if they're in that finishing stages where they're trying to get to be a chunky monkey and they're in that feedlot, eating up, corn and some other goodies like that. But Allison's getting that money shot with the grass there. But hopefully she's not zooming in on too many weeds. We're looking at
Why
clover.
do they feed them all that grain towards the end? What's the benefit to us when we buy that product?
Yes. So I don't know if you've ever heard of phrases like prime, choice, select. Sometimes your parents might be looking for that when they go to the grocery store counter. And that is essentially a grade that's given for the amount of fat or marbling that's on a beef product when it's in the counter. And fat is what makes things taste good, to be quite honest. So but sometimes people want leaner pieces of meat, for different reasons, maybe health conscious reasons. And so with that being said, when they're in the finishing lot, when you're putting an animal on grain or something that's like corn, for instance, is a high energy type of feed. Energy equates to fat. So it helps make sure that the marbling is getting on those animals correctly, and is going to give you a nice tasty product at the end of the day. All right, let's see if homegirl, this is 017. I don't know if she's going to come all the way up here and try to drink out of the water or not. So essentially the backstory behind this water is the other day I came out and this whole area was wet down here. It was just mud everywhere. And so I didn't know how to fix it. So I just cut it off before it made it any worse. So that's, so their alternative water is, you may have seen it down in the bottom. Like I said, there's like 7 different waterers here. So there's one up on top of the hill you can't quite see. There's one down in the bottom. There's one, actually you can see from here, there's another yellow water Richie up on the hill over here. So, and then there's a couple in the barn that they can drink out of. So pretty much wherever they're at, they can get water. Just doesn't happen to be this one today. Any other questions? We might be
one of our questions is, where do they go in the winter?
Where do they go in the winter?
How you take care of them in the winter time?
Yes, can definitely describe that. So when God made a cow, he made the cow to be everything it needed to be to exist outside. Now, we as humans try to provide them alternative sources, but these animals for the most part can pretty much survive any type of weather out here in the open. We try to make sure that in the wintertime, you're putting them in a space where maybe they get like a wind break. Like that's why trees are really important on a property. But if you have ever driven past cows in the wintertime and it is just snowing like crazy, and you drive past and you see snow piled up on a cow's back and you're like, oh no, that poor cow, it must be so cold. It's actually not. And that's because an animal, they've got really, really, really thick hide. They've got hair, and definitely a winter coat that comes in. But more importantly, they have an outer layer of fat around their entire body. And fat also acts as an insulator. So when you're driving by and you see snow stacked on an animal's back like that, on a cow's back, it means that there's no heat escaping from their body to melt that snow. And so, like I said, I mean, if it's a blizzard, something that we typically do with these ladies or any cows that we have is feed. If you're feeding them a lot, it generates a lot of energy within the animal and creates a lot of internal heat. So if there's going to be a big storm that comes in, we extra stock the feed, because what they're going to do to make sure that they're being a little powerhouse or being their own little heat maker, is if you put extra feed out in front of them during the winter time. And like this winter, my dad came and helped me, my brother came and helped me, and we put hay underneath all these trees going up the fence line there to make sure that they had access to feed to stay warm. And as long as you can kind of give them a dry spot, you unroll some hay out, they can kind of get out of that wet stuff and lay down. They are happy as can be just being outside.
So why Watching them lick the truck.
Are they? Why are they doing that? I don't know. Maybe there's some old salt from the road. So I talked a little bit earlier, and actually there's some bunks over here that if we had ended up on that side, I would have showed you. But especially in the summertime when they're out here on this fresh grass, cows really need a particular set of different minerals and vitamins to make sure that their nutritional needs are being met. And one of the things, oddly enough, that cows love and are obsessed with is salt. It's something that tastes good to them. And so I have not washed my truck in a long time. And so they might even be licking off some of that road salt that they smell on there, just because it's pretty tasty for them. They're a savory and not a sweet type of animal. Even though they do like the molasses and the grain I gave them earlier. I'm so glad, like this is the closest I've been to these ladies, like since I started feeding them. Y'all must have been good luck. You brought the good luck on your webcam today. Yes, that's right. I know. And as soon as we go towards the truck, they'll all be like, run away.
What other questions do we have?
Any other questions out there? I think I started talking about this earlier, but I did see a question about women in agriculture. How many women were in agriculture? I actually had to Google that one this morning, and I found on the Virginia Department of Ag website that in Virginia, about 36% of primary farm owners in Virginia are women. And I think that's probably a little bit higher than the national average, but it's somewhere between 30 and 35%, probably on the national average. But we're out here, we're farming. So if you're a girl, you can be a farmer too.
Other questions?
Any other questions out there?
Morgan, one question. We've gotten a couple on food where do different breeds of cows need different types of grain? And then we also have a question on, will they eat fruits and veggies?
Oh, okay. Do different cows need different types of grain? I would say between, like, if you're talking about just beef cattle, their nutrition across different breeds is going to be pretty similar up until probably the finishing point, I would say. You've got some breeds, like if you've ever seen an all-white cow, they're called a Charolais. They're probably going to get a little bit bigger, so they might be on feed a little bit longer in the finishing stages. But for the most part, as far as like nutritional quality or what they're eating, everybody's about the same. Now, I can't speak for dairy because that's a whole different, that's all Greek to me. I don't know anything about some dairy cows. But will they eat some fruits and veggies? Yes, they'll eat some things that might even surprise you. I had a show steer one time when I was in high school that would eat crushed up Oreos out of my hand. So they at one point in time, my dad was feeding so he was actually backgrounding some calves and wanted to give them something kind of interesting. And so we have a local like candy distribution plant here. And so Hershey actually had some extra chocolates and granolas and cereals, and they ground it all up in this mix. And so there was, even though it's not your typical nutritional value that you have for cows, there was enough of energy feeds in there and some of those byproducts that you can actually feed to animals and reuse. So the cool thing about cows, I'll tell you this, is that cows are utilizing a space that you typically can't crop. And so, if you've got real rocky ground or you've got some really steep ground, something like that, someplace that you couldn't plant corn or wheat or something else, a different type of food in, these ladies are the best way to make sure that that ground is utilized and nothing goes to waste. Any other questions? I think we've got some fans in 17 and 519 over here. They just seem to be like hanging out. Yeah, they're just trying to be famous in a small town, I guess. But any other questions?
We have a question on why are some of the cows' faces white and some are brown? Maybe with that, you could talk a little bit more about different types, of cows.
Yeah, so you can definitely tell that these are pretty heavily Angus influenced cows because they're largely black. Angus are all black cows. Um, Typically, my dad will, when he is breeding for replacements, he crosses them with a Simmental, which is a black with a white blaze, or a Hereford, which is red with a white face. And so red is a recessive gene, if you've talked about genes and kind of genetics in school. So a lot of times they don't necessarily come out red, but they're still getting that white face. And same thing with Simmental, that white face ends up coming out a good bit. So, and those are all beef breeds. So the breeds that we're breeding among each other, hybrid vigor, typically we like to think that that Angus breeds typically have a really good marbling. You may have heard of the Certified Angus Beef program, or if you go to a restaurant and you see Angus on the menu, it's typically because steaks are really nice and juicy. They're very flavorful. But Angus also tend to be a smaller breed. And so you crossbreed them for that hybrid vigor to get kind of a bigger frame, more pounds of product, which means more money for the farmer in your Simmental and your Herefords.
It'd be the same for your pets, right?
Yeah.
A dog that was more than one breed.
That's
some
exciting.
Dogs are good things that are good at sleeping, and some dogs are really good at
Yeah.
being fed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Allison was talking about different types of dogs. I just adopted a dog from the shelter. His name is Wrigley. He's 100% mutt. I mean, who knows what he is? He's got some lab in him. They said he had some beagle in him. I'm sure he's got all sorts of other stuff in him, but it makes him a good dog. All crossbred like that.
We had a first grade class. I thought like asked, why do they swish their tails?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know if you've seen me going like this, but there's some flies out here. And so tails swooshing back and forth kind of help knock those flies off. A lot of times we'll, if you've ever done this with your pets, either put a flea collar on them or treat them with something on the back of their neck. We do the same thing with cows. At the beginning of the season, we'll put some protected on them so they don't get any parasites or they don't get any worms, anything gross, lice. But out here, they're kind of swishing their tails. Sometimes you can put another ear tag in their ear that actually keeps the flies away from their face. So that's that. That's why they also throw their head around too, like that. Any other questions? I can't wait to watch the playback for this of my hand motions, but they're pretty happy today. It's kind of overcast. It's gotten to be a little cool, but it's good eating weather.
Isn't it sort of their perfect temperature?
This is their perfect temperature. So, you know, maybe you noticed, but when we first rode out, the sun was shining. It was pretty, it's a pretty day here, but at the same time, the sun shining down on black-hided cattle drives them to the trees, which is why they were all the way in the back earlier. Now that it's gotten overcast, now they're in their happy eating time. When it's a good temperature, this is a prime time for them to be putting their heads down and putting some grass in their belly.
What's a good temperature for them?
Oh, what's a good temperature for 50 degrees? Tammy had to help me with that one. I'm learning as much as you are today. Yep, 50 degrees. So
how cold does it have to get for them to feel like it's cold?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if there's a certain temperature. I will say that cattle really don't like wind. And wind, of course, we all know that wind creates like a chill factor, a wind chill. And so that regardless of what the temperature is outside, wind is what can really get to them. Wind and it being wet. So they can withstand some pretty cold temperatures, but at that point, if you know, I'm trying to think, we had almost a foot of snow back in January here. And so we tried to roll hay out onto the ground so they could, and we put it back behind this hill here because it kind of created a windbreak. I know, we're going to get some rain now. Oh man. They may be doing that. We can kind of.
Do they have a pattern?
Oh yeah. Cows definitely have a pattern. So they normally take a lap. They might even be hanging a right and coming into. Yep, that's exactly what they're doing. They're coming in to get a look at that mineral I was telling you about earlier. It's down in these bunks. We can kind of walk towards the fence line over here if you want to to see it, or if it's raining, we can get back in the truck. But there's a couple bunks that are set out with some mineral over here. So, you eat a bunch of grass, you're starting to feel like you're got to cleanse the palate a little bit, mix it up a little bit. And so they'll go to these bunks over here, get a couple licks of salt. What does salt make you do? It makes you thirsty. So they very well be coming in and getting some, taking a few licks off that salt block. And then you can see up there on the hill another waterer, and then they'll likely go up and get a drink of water out of the waterer. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other questions?
Any other questions out there? Okay, well, I'll just kind of say a few more thoughts here as we're kind of wrapping up. And if you've got any final questions, this will give you a chance to get them submitted in. But, I'm really glad that you guys came out to the farm today. This is pretty exciting. I always enjoy having people come out. And if you ever want to be here for real, just let me know. You can come anytime. And I would say that most farmers love to welcome people to their places. They love to let people know. This is a fun fact, but only about 2% of the population is involved in production agriculture. So 98% of the population doesn't grow up like this, isn't around this kind of stuff. So, but we're very proud of what we do here. And if you ever want to come out for a tour, all you got to do is, go to your local farmers market and ask around. And I'm sure that you can get your own real live in-person farm tour sometime.
Well, we'd like to go ahead and thank everybody for joining our virtual field trip. And we'd like to thank our farmer, Miss Morgan, for showing us all around her farm. We hope we answered enough of your questions and that you learned a little bit more about beef farming, particularly in Virginia. And so we want to thank everybody for spending their afternoon and joining us down on the farm today. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Farmer Morgan, for showing us around. We had a wonderful time.